Five, four, three, two, one. Anthony, we made it, man. We did the Atlantis hard fork. It actually,
Yeah, I saw that this morning.
I know. Go ETC.
No issues.
Right. And, one of the things, if you like, I don't see how there's many difficult things a project can do much other than an upgrade, a protocol upgrade once it's launched, right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
So with that being said, it went successful. It's a big deal. It's been advertised. Why is there no like reflection in like activity or price?
Uh, I don't know. I have no idea why the price does what it does. I have no idea why ETC shot up in Bitcoin value recently. I don't know. It
Yeah,
just does.
it's just one of those things that you can't explain. Like, because really, the only thing that could have happened once the fork finished was that it failed.
Yeah.
That like priced in expectations for a fork happening, you can tell that this is not a rational market.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, if anything, like if I were if I were like actively trading or something, I would think that the price should go down immediately prior to the fork because you're taking some risk off.
Right.
Like maybe you're not taking your whole set of risk, but you're taking something off. So then if the fork goes fine, you can just buy back in at around the same price. Like it's very weird to me that most of the time leading up to these things, it actually pumps for a lot of coins and then but never dumps, which I just don't understand.
Yeah, it has to do something with information still that a lot of the market isn't um, cognizant of all the changes, the significance. It has to be more influenced by big names buying or big partnerships, like something like Chainlink partnering with Google, for example, right? Like those are the things that I think move the needle today.
Chainlink partnering with Google. I
Yeah,
posted a story about Chainlink on Twitter like yesterday.
really.
Pretty.
What you say?
I was just out a couple weeks ago and I overheard this guy talking to what I assume was his girlfriend about how he's going to buy some Chainlink. And you could kind of tell he's already bought it, but he's trying to explain the Oracle problem to her, which nobody cares about except for a small group of nerds on the internet. So to me, it was just like, it was funny because he didn't actually understand it. He just wanted to justify to himself.
Why he bought it? Why he's
Yeah,
holding his
why he
bags
bought
now?
Yeah, why he's holding bags that are underwater and how Google's going to help him pump his bags.
Yeah. So on Chainlink, a friend of mine, you know, when I finally get people to understand why they buy Bitcoin,
Mhm.
there's still this like little cognitive bias that's like, oh, maybe I'll find the new one.
Yeah.
And I say, hey, dude, I'm looking at Chainlink. You think Google's gonna buy them? I'm like, okay, so you obviously have no idea what we're talking about. If you say that that's gonna happen, Anyway, um,
I used to be the same way. I can't hold judgment.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a learning process, right? It takes
Yeah.
time.
The
So
stakes were lower back then, though.
yeah, yeah, a lot lower. But the good thing is, like, this is a natural, I think, evolution where the education, takes out some of that risk, along with it, the reward. Of course, we're not going to see these like super pumps like we used to. But
Yeah.
dude, you've been in ETC for like a long time, right? I
Since
mean,
yeah, since Block 1.92. Almost. I'm kind of embellishing there. That there were like anywhere from like half a week to a full week where I thought ETC was dead, where I thought there was just one chain, and then I found out that they were actually not dead.
how'd you
And
find
then
out they were not that?
Well, then I actually saw chat rooms and stuff, like because some of that stuff was like kind of getting removed and everything. But then at that time, I just kind of went and joined, and yeah, I was there fairly active for a while, and then I took like a 3 or 6 month hiatus, and then I'd been there ever since.
Now, so you were in the Ethereum community.
Yeah, I was just posting on Reddit and stuff, and then when I went to do the ETC stuff, I just kind of like I like changed my identity and stuff. Back then, I was far more like I think I still had my full name, but I like changed from my other accounts. But yeah, I was active back then. but not like active. I wasn't developing. I wasn't doing smart contracts. I was just a fan of Ethereum, and I didn't actually believe or understand anybody actually having that other opinion on what to do in the case of a DAO-like incident.
And so in like, who else that's part of the community today was active then?
Cody was, this guy on the Discord named Miko, who's like running it. He is. There were other people, but they somewhat dropped off. Yeah, there's still like Omni Edge was there for pretty much, I think, since the start, maybe even before me by a couple days, and yeah, there's others.
And
Charles Hoskin.
Donald and Hoskinson, of course.
Yeah.
It's nice to see, you know, the OGs and the fact that people stick to something over time. You know, you guys have a lot more context than anybody else. And with that being,
I've barely like done anything in ETC lately.
Well, I mean, to be honest, there's also not like, these are not things that are meant to rapidly change, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Atlantis is something that's been talked about for at least 7 months, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that, you know, it's one of those things that you need to be in it week after week. I wanted to talk about the ECIP you put forward, which you put that forward maybe, again, 7-8 months ago?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, and that's specifically about reducing the default gas limit on the mining side. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that was a ECIP that I never really intended to completely go through, but I really wanted to raise this issue of what it is and where it can be solved, because right now on Ethereum it's just not working out and everybody's kind of in denial about it.
Okay, so let's bring some more color to this, right? Like, what exactly is the problem that you see, you know, coming down or like existing today?
So with the 8 million gas limit, which is roughly what it is, it grows the chain so fast that syncing it becomes a very arduous process, to the point where we're 4 years out on Ethereum now, and somebody just tried to sync it on fairly decent hardware, and it took 25 days to sync. And the most recent sets of blocks are like the past couple of weeks, like every 8 or 9 days worth of data takes another full day of syncing and validation. And so if you compare that to something like Bitcoin, you can sync the entire chain in 15 to 18 hours. You can literally wake up and have it done before you go to bed. And that's like from Genesis, from block 0, where it's fully validated. On Ethereum, you just can't do that. And I think that it's very important to make full validation as easy as possible, because, I mean, obviously we're not going to approach the Bitcoin limits, because Bitcoin is really maximizes for this aspect, whereas on a Turing complete chain you can't. But the problem is if it becomes too difficult and too arduous to sync the network, such that only a few groups are able to actually do a full sync, then they control the network now, because they're the only ones running the nodes.
Right.
So any rule that they want, they can add. They can add like a new DAO-like rule without anybody else's approval, because they're this small group running the nodes.
And no one else can validate.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so they can change. They can like fake hashes and stuff, but they can completely change rules of the network that are still, you know, valid to your light client or whatever.
So,
or could
to follow the conversation. Right now, the gas limit's at, was it 8 million?
Yeah, 8 million.
So when we say it's 8 million, what does that mean?
Each and every opcode you're executing when you run a transaction, like for the less technical people, that's like literally just an opcode is an instruction to the machine. Each and every one of those instructions requires a different amount of resources. So each and every one of those instructions has a gas cost. And every time they're run, that adds up. So I think a regular transaction is about 21,000 gas if you're just sending value from, say, me to you. But if you're doing more complex things, then it runs up much higher. And if you have 8 million gas right now, it just seems to be approaching this thing where it's on a curve and it's slowly approaching where 1 day of data equals 1 day of syncing. I don't know if it'll get there at 8 million gas, but it's getting way too close, uncomfortably close.
So the 8 million, and we say that 21,000 is for a simple transaction.
Mhm.
Is that like is that the equivalent to looking at the block size of Bitcoin, for example?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just the since Ethereum doesn't really have block size because it's Turing complete and each operation is a different amount of resources. So yeah, they use gas limit to kind of do that. In real terms, I think every 10 minutes worth of Ethereum blocks at 8 million gas limit roughly averages out to about 1.5 megabytes, give or take. But it's just a different metric.
Right, and but so if you lowered the gas limit, it would lower the average block size.
Yeah, and it will lower the amount of computations someone needs to do in order to sync a node. So I propose reducing it by like a factor of 8, like reduce it down to 1 million.
Now, would that affect the capabilities of the smart contracts? Would it affect how many transactions? Like, what is your trade off by decreasing the gas limit?
Yeah, it would decrease the number of transactions per block, and it would also make some operations too prohibitively expensive to do. But anytime I try and figure out what those operations are, I always get the answer that it's Zk-snarks, and Zk-snarks are barely even used on Zcash, the chain for using Zk-snarks.
Right.
So not too concerned about them being unusable on Ethereum, especially when I think they take up a good half to nearly a full block.
Oh,
And that, yeah, that means like your an anonymous set of transactions that you'd be mixed through are so small that it would be de-anonymized anyway. But regardless, even if the answer like was amazing and you were really like turning off this amazing feature, you're still sacrificing the change decentralization, and you can't do that. Like, yeah, everything's about trade-offs, but there are some trade-offs you just can't do. Like, I could right now, go and get my Lambo because I could just run up money on my credit cards and do it. And the trade-off would be that I'm going to pay exorbitant on it, but that's okay because I only care about right now. And we'll figure that out. Anthony, 6 or 12 months down the line, is the Anthony that's going to have to worry about
yeah,
that,
screw
not
that,
me.
Anthony. Today I'm
Yeah,
driving the Lambo.
yeah.
No, and I think that this is very. I mean, would I be correct in saying that this is analogous to the conversation of big blocks, small blocks in Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's very similar.
Luke Dash has his proposal to go down to 300 kilobytes per block for, I think, the same reasons, which is you threaten decentralization. Not everybody can run these ridiculously, hardware intense nodes, and by having a very large chain to sync with, you remove the likelihood that a lot of people can be involved.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's just it's a really interesting situation. But it's really weird too that you would socialize these costs to every other participant of the network. Like nobody's thinking a node makes any money off of it, so like it's just silly. And the other thing that's often overlooked too is you get other properties out of reducing the block size. Like you get a better fee market also. So if you're aiming towards a fee market, then or reducing inflation to zero or near zero, then you have to establish a fee market. And if you have less space, then it actually increases the value of the cost that people will pay for each transaction. Up until I guess the block size is too small and nobody thinks it's practical to use, but that doesn't seem to be the case at all.
So I do, before we go on to the fee market, because I think that's a great discussion. On the Zk-snark side, you said something that's, I mean, I think it's worth focusing on, is that because it's so rare today on Ethereum, it would be obvious who it would be de-anonymized, as you said, immediately, because you're the only guy using a Zk-snark, because you're occupying almost the entire block.
Yeah, you're occupying the entire block, and even then, like, there's only so much value going in. So when it goes in, yeah, you don't see it anymore. But when it comes back out, you could kind of guess that it's one of these three addresses that put the money in.
Because you can't fit more transactions in that block.
No, and that doesn't even matter. It's just that you can see all the values that went in from the clear to the shielded, and then came back out.
So, I mean, the fact that Zk-snarks exists on Ethereum and now Ethereum Classic, is that just more like, hey, let's show that we can have these bells and whistles, more than, you know, it's going to be integral to the use case?
What was the bell and whistle that we were talking
The
about?
Zk-snark. Like,
Oh,
ultimately, it sounds like it's virtually unusable in its current state.
yeah, for anything, and I think you could do that far before a lot of the hard forks too. I don't know if there were opcodes added that made it easier or not, but I can't do the moon math of Zk-snarks, which is impressive, honestly, but like it's just so low use.
Yeah, no, I'm under the impression that there were two opcodes that were added.
Oh, okay.
But either way, I think that there's you've brought up good points to show that, you know, it's more of a talking point than it is a use case. On the fee market side,
Mm-hmm.
the need to, well, it's not a need, but the positive effect of having lower gas limits is that you promote a fee market, and that's great when you have no block rewards.
Mm-hmm.
So is the fee market discussion, does that lend itself more towards a POW consensus, or do you think that's equally important for a POS as well?
I think it really depends on your monetary policy. Like if your monetary policy includes permanent inflation, such that you think it's sustainable, then no, you don't have to worry too much about a fee market. But if you don't, then if you have one where you don't have that inflation, then yeah, you definitely need to worry about a fee market, right? Otherwise, why? I guess in POS, your validators are incentivized to behave correctly because otherwise they'll lose their stake. But then why are they incentivized to validate in the first place? Like, I don't understand. There's like an imbalance in POS from my
Yeah,
point of view.
I think just looking at the current roadmap for ETH versus Ethereum Classic, the fee market is more important in Ethereum Classic than it is in Ethereum.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because our monetary policy isn't going to change.
So if we were to look at where it's very important to do it, I'm not saying that the gas limit doesn't need to be reduced in Ethereum as well, but it seems like it's even more important to do it in Ethereum Classic.
Yeah, and we also have the advantage of hindsight too. So yeah.
Right, because the chain, I mean, I would think the size, do you know what the size difference is right now if somebody's syncing a node?
I don't know, but the last time I tried to sync an ETC node from like Genesis was probably 3 to 6 months ago, and I synced it in probably 24 hours. So it's still not bad right now.
Yeah, it's probably
Not great. It's not
1/10
Bitcoin.
smaller.
Yeah.
So one of the benefits of doing this for ETC as soon as possible is you keep the chain size lower, and this is something we're going to inevitably need to secure a strong fee market, because you're going to reduce the amount of transactions you can accept into a block.
Yeah, exactly. And like it's silly too because it's always something you could up later, right? If we suddenly become twice as efficient at processing blocks, and everybody thinks that the node is syncing, efficiently, such that anybody can join when they want, then yeah, then you can up it. But like it's better to be conservative right now rather than relying on solving it in the future.
And these are all defaults, right? Because can't,
Yeah, it was defaults.
right. So, I mean, even like we don't even need to have consensus on this. Ultimately, like a miner themselves could just choose to.
Yeah. Miners themselves are the ones that vote on it. That was a really bad design decision, I personally believe, because miners shouldn't be able to vote on anything. The other option you could do is you could always do, a user-activated soft fork in order to force blocks lower if miners didn't do it or if adjusting the default didn't do it. ETC right now, the only reason miners are voting ETC blocks up to use 8 million gas is simply because at one point parity adjusted for the Ethereum for their client running on the Ethereum network to target 8 million gas, which is what the majority of miners use right now on ETC. And when they did that, they didn't set it per network, they set it for all networks across because there was no logic in there for it. And so ETC, like, reducing the gas limit shouldn't even be controversial in the first place because the reason it's even at 8 million gas right now is because somebody changed a value in a node software. Nobody even asked for it. It just happened.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
wild. Like it's not even a discussion. It wasn't intentional almost, and now like there's. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of discussion about this though, the gas limit, right?
No, I was pretty much the start of like complaining about it, and it's taken a while, but I see more and more people complaining now, so I'm happy, and now I complain about the gas limit less. Except I complain about the Ethereum one because I think it's gone crazy. Like they're going to add 45 days per year to their blockchain for sync time,
Now,
which
on the
means
Ethereum side,
this time next year it's another 45 days.
is there anybody like championing? Because I've seen a lot of people talking about increasing the the gas limit on Ethereum. Is there anybody championing it to decrease it?
No, I think I have seen some people against raising it further, but I haven't seen really anybody pro decreasing it. Yeah, they just don't think it's a problem, and they also don't think though that that you need a full node or that you need to fully they full node used to mean you have all your data and you fully validated it, and it meant that because it was obvious to everybody that you just needed to do both those things, so it was called full node because they weren't different. Now you can have a full node with the full data, but it's not fully validated. And that full validation part is the only part that keeps you tracking the rules of the network. So it's really weird.
So, like the other nodes are almost like like fugazi, like fake nodes. Like I've
Yeah,
got. I feel like warm and fuzzy. I'm doing something, but you're not really validating everything. Somebody can sneak past a change in the rules, like you mentioned.
yeah, they've got all the data, but they don't have. Yeah, but they haven't checked it. So like, yeah, it's like they have like a literal suitcase full of money, and they haven't checked the bills to see if they're legit or not. Like, but in their defense, the one thing they are doing, though I disagree with it for an ETC approach, is they're increasing the cost of certain opcodes that people were abusing. But that
That
also breaks the
prevents
smart
spam.
contract.
That helps prevent spam. Is that what that does?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody who's really involved in it, and he was telling me that one of the main reasons is a lot of dApps started abusing events firing because events aren't supposed to be stored on disk or anywhere. They're just supposed to be emitted and then forgotten, like normal events. But people were like, this is free data storage, and then so clients by default or maybe by a flag actually now store the events, and they want to increase some of these opcodes involved so that it costs what it's supposed to cost to store it. But it's weird to me because the clients aren't obligated to store these events. The spec doesn't say it, and just because the dApps expect it, like it's like a core part of Ethereum is kind of we're going to serve the user rather than the network. and that's like kind of the base of the ideology, like a very like SF style of creating software of just like we're not going to worry too much about the software itself. We're gonna uh, get it in front of the users. We're gonna move fast and break things. And yeah, I think that's mostly what it is. But like I haven't really looked at those opcodes particularly. All I heard initially was, oh, these opcodes are going to break some smart contracts that are running on chain, but forget them because they're they should know that opcode values might change. Opcode costs might change one day. It's like that is not the way to do that. But yeah,
Yeah, it's not the ethos of the blockchain. Do things slowly and don't break things.
yeah.
It's what you said, the SF style. I like that. So it's interesting that there's no one championing this on the Ethereum side. And I had an interview with Uri Klarman, the CEO of Bloxroot, where he was very pumped that they're helping on the bandwidth side, so that an increase on the gas limit is possible.
Mhm.
You know, why do you think that on the Bitcoin side, there was a very strong counterbalance to big blocks, whereas on Ethereum, it doesn't seem like there's something similar.
Well, I mean, I guess there was ETC, but yeah, there's nobody on Ethereum that really thinks big blocks are bad. I think it's a completely different way of looking at it. Like, I don't even think that like it's not malicious. It's not even necessarily a bad idea, depending on your beliefs for it. Because, like, for example, for Ethereum 1 is going to be replaced with Ethereum 2, and then that's going to solve problems. And then, I don't know, maybe there'll be Ethereum 3 one day when we discover problems with Ethereum 2. But so if you have the idea that these networks can evolve, can completely change, or can even be completely replaced and supplanted, then yeah, it makes sense to not worry too much about the far future, or in this case, the fairly near future, because by that point you're going to have moved on to something else. But for like the Bitcoin or ETC side, it's like no, this network needs to run and needs to keep operating for as long as it's physically capable of doing. And in order to do that, we have to be very, very conservative. So, like, I see their side. I just don't think that it's the right approach for software of this type. Like, the SF approach, even though I ragged on it, it's not bad for everything because
Right.
sometimes moving fast and breaking things helps you roll out new features and stuff. And if you could A/B test them and they work, then yeah, you're great and you're golden and nobody cares. It's nice and centralized. You can always reboot the server. But on this, it's more complicated.
Yeah, and I guess the philosophy comes down to what you think is going to happen in the near future regarding hardware and technology. If there's going to be upgrades in storage, for example, then it doesn't become as much of a problem. Um,
Mhm.
so it's not that there's a disagreement on decentralization necessarily. It's, do we think that, hey, we'll figure it out, versus we need to make sure that this is always staying decentralized no matter what, looking towards the future.
Yeah, and yeah, Ethereum they definitely are more flexible on decentralization. Treating trust as a spectrum, and it's like yeah, but like what end of the spectrum do you want to be at? You probably want to be as close to the trustless end as possible. But yeah,
Design choices. So right
choice.
now you are focused on smart contracts yourself, right?
Yeah, and I have a co-founder now, and we're starting to go out to investors, so it's exciting and fun. But yeah, we've been developing a couple different projects. How this kind of started is I was developing something where I wanted to just do authentication or permissions for basically any web resource. So any website or any particular endpoint at a URL or an a REST API or something, you could throw behind a smart contract, and you have this trusted third party, obviously, because they're providing your service, but you want to be able to tell them, I want 2 of 3 and a multi-sig in order to be able to access this. Or a really good one is, I'm Elon Musk's lawyer. If Elon Musk goes to log in, I want a smart contract to ping me and require my approval because I know if he's been drinking or whatever.
Yeah, he's about to go on Twitter and tank the stock price. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to get the SEC giving everybody a headache. And so that type of thing. And there's a lot of flexibility there with how you can manage permissions. So I wanted to do that. And then I was going to basically build a company around it. And I was kind of going to do maybe domain reseller, just as an example, to kind of get people to see this is what you can do with this technology. With ethereumclassic.org, who owns that and how? And in the real world, it's one person owns it and no matter what. But we want to manage it in a decentralized network. Okay, we can't get to full decentralized DNS right now because the world doesn't work like that. But what can we get to? We could get to where we tell a trusted third party, here's our pre-existing social contract. All 3 of us need to sign off on this in order to make any change. Point this at a new server, or something. And I think that's really powerful and isn't something that's been explored yet. So that was part of the project, and now we're using that as a front end to managing cap tables and equity distributions, and we're going to be tracking that using a kind of blockchain database type backend. Again, not a trustless network, but a network that a certain way of data storage that might give you some benefits that you don't get in traditional data storage solutions. So you don't get private key signing every state transition, so you don't know who made that change to your SQL table. And you get, and in SQL, for example, you have very lossy data. So if data gets overridden or changed by somebody, person B changes data that person A set, and then person A is confused about what changed and why and who, or what that data even was, they can't get it back anymore unless you've explicitly programmed for that. So we want to be able to do kind of what I've been calling hindsight analysis, where you can look back in time at data and see what it looked like 6 months ago. And in some applications that works. Applications where you don't have super high data throughput and where you just need some more reliability or auditability of the data. Whereas something like Twitter, it would never work. You can never put Twitter on a blockchain, no matter how people try, though there is a successful attempt using sidechains, which I agree with, and that's great.
So on the multi-sig side, because I think that's, awesome. That's very fascinating. You're using, how are you using a smart contract there? Is that Ethereum that you're using? And how exactly does that work?
Yeah, so it would be, it would be any EVM-based blockchain, so of course ETC. But you essentially write a smart contract that you give it to your service provider, and it's just compiled. And the service provider is going to call a function, and that function, they're just going to give a message to the program. And the program's the only thing that understands the message. The service provider doesn't care. And so the service provider just runs it through the program, and then the program spits out, a Boolean, says yes or no, you can or can't do this. So we
reducing to non-tech users, the way somebody does a Facebook sign-in, the third-party application, it doesn't. All it knows is, was it successful or not?
Yeah, exactly.
Would it be similar in that it's looking to this smart contract saying, hey, were the correct authorities giving access to this?
Yeah, it would be similar, and it could be done even over OAuth the same way that Facebook and Google and Twitter logins are done.
Very cool. So, again, I always try to re-summarize. You own a domain that I now also want to be co-owner, right? But as it is today, only one person's really the admin. As long as you have, we could both have the login details. One of us could go and make changes unilaterally.
Yeah, without a doubt.
With your solution, neither of us can get drunk or rage quit and destroy everything.
Yeah,
We
both of us have to.
we both have to rage quit and destroy everything together, or make a good change. And nothing like this exists today.
No, not in this application. I've heard of something called, I think there's a guy who says he's been doing it since May of this year called EOth. I tried to talk to him. He said he couldn't send me any of the code or share it because, like, I think I sent him my code or I wanted to. Um, and yeah, it's just not something that's doable yet or that hasn't been thought up.
Yeah.
It's completely doable.
It's funny. This is one of those ideas that sounds like a no-brainer after you hear about it. Like it's like, of course this should exist.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, I mean, no, it makes so much sense. It's a great use of smart contracts. Um, would you be able to do something like this without a smart contract?
Um, no, well, like, yes, but you would have to build the whole other system around it. You'd have to build like kind of your own self-contained VM. You're still getting a smart contract. It's just like, can you build this? I guess I'm answering, can you build it without a blockchain? The
There
answer
you
is yeah. And we actually intend to, because this is something that for most cases you could run just through like something like Sputnik VM, and it would basically do the same thing, or something that could run through like a Python environment, but you get issues there with security and stuff. You want to as minimized of an attack surface as possible when other people are executing code. But yeah, you can do it without blockchain, but it's a little more complicated, and yeah, it's a little harder. Like the blockchain, the reason why I would use it is because these tools are here and they're fairly well tested compared to anything else.
How often do
Uh,
you hear that? How often do you hear that building it off of the blockchain is more complicated, and we have the tools to build it here? I love that.
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's only complicated by circumstance, but
No,
yeah,
it just, what I'm saying? Like almost everything that I hear is like how you're trying to take something that we can easily do in the centralized world,
yeah,
and you're making it overly complicated for no reason, trying to bring it to blockchain.
yeah.
Whereas here, the idea from inception is simpler in the world of blockchain. The tools already exist for it.
Mhm.
And it just gets more complicated if you try to bring it to the centralized world.
Oh yeah, I really like that. That's a really good point. Yeah, that's the way to find fixes to things. It's not like what already exists that could be made better by blockchain. What doesn't exist that could be created by blockchain.
And
And like this,
how far along are you on this?
I have a proof of concept. I made the GitHub private for a couple weeks just because I was working out this whole, we're calling it Clarity Corporate right now, but I don't know if that name's going to stick yet. But we were just working that out, and like I had some Git commits I was making that like kind of alluded to it, and I didn't want to reveal anything yet. But I'll make it public again. It'll be on my GitHub, and then we're gonna build it out much further to where it's a much more useful tool. Like we need them to talk to each other and stuff across the internet, and a lot of other things to build. But yeah, should be really cool.
Well,
And like, yeah,
the moment it's released, man, let me know so we can also share that. I mean, it sounds like, I'm telling you, like it sounds like a no-brainer, right? One of those things that after you hear about it, you're like, why didn't I think of this? Um, Before I let you go, I've always wanted to know, where did the name Pyskell come from?
so Pyskell comes from a portmanteau of Python and Haskell. I can write Python well, but I think I've attempted to learn Haskell about 3 times and made it somewhere through. I forget what that website is, but it's a website that has all these old equations, and you would implement stuff like different series and different small little like tests. Like I'm trying to think of an example. Like to calculate certain numbers or like to calculate the golden ratio or that type of thing. And that's as far as I ever got with Haskell. Not to go off on a tangent there, but I will add to just back to the smart contracts is
Yeah,
that this idea for like smart contracts is not my idea. Like I don't want any credit for it. Like this idea for smart contracts is Nick Szabo's idea in 1997, and it was basically that. It was like if we have a car, there's 3 or 4 different people, different groups who are interested in it. If you're like renting it out, like it's the person renting it, it's the person who's it's the rentee, it's the insurance company, and like they all have these different rules that they want the car to abide by, and like whoever's renting it out has a payment schedule. The insurance company probably doesn't want it going over 80 miles an hour. Um, all those little things could be encoded in a smart contract because you have these social contracts between people that nobody can really enforce. The only way you enforce these social contracts is the legal system, and the legal system sucks so much to go through that you really try your hardest to avoid it.
right.
You actually pay lawyers to not go to court most of the time. That's where they make most of their money. Uh, yeah, it's really interesting, and this is like the main use of smart contracts. So I'm just
Yeah,
happy to be able
and
to
look,
find.
no, I don't think anybody's under the impression that multi-sig is invented by you.
No,
Lots
not
of
multi. Just
wallets.
this idea,
Yeah,
this
no,
idea of encoding social contracts and smart contracts is a
and
really cool idea.
the multi-sig exists for so many different wallets. But I think it's fair to give a shout out to Nick Szabo. Obviously, I mean, anytime he's talking about anything blockchain related. Um, but now that you brought that up, you reiterated that this is not unique. I feel like I'm missing something there. So, the authentication part for me is what was unique. But bringing up Nick, what was your thinking there that we might have glossed over about smart contracts or social contracts?
Oh, it was just that it's not just about multisig; it's about being able to encode any agreement.
Right.
By it. Like what happened with a great example is the Ethereum Classic GitHub takeover. Like in our social contract, nobody ever thought like, yeah, one person can just take exclusive control of the GitHub org. Like, no, that doesn't make any sense. But it would have been great if we could have encoded that and said, us three need to sign off on it
Right.
to change any of these settings.
Yeah,
Um,
that's also like a very weird kind of management in that it's this flat hierarchy, you know, like
yeah,
I didn't know, I know very little about GitHub. And finding out that, the moment you add one member, that one member can kick out every other member, I thought that was very bizarre.
it's an insane design decision, but yeah, I don't understand it at all.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the murky waters of the ETC GitHub takeover on this video.
Oh,
I
no, no. It was just an example of how your social contract can disagree with the real world, and how can we get how can we get GitHub to just understand what our social contract is and absolve themselves of all responsibility? Like that's how.
Do you think so? Was that part of the genesis of this idea?
Uh, no, but it like definitely helped. I think somewhere in the back of my head, it definitely helped push
Put
it
that in the
forward.
story. Put that in the pitch deck.
Put it out of the story. Yeah,
Yeah, just put it in the pitch deck. Say, I got so pissed off.
yeah.
It was like, how do I solve? I have an idea. Um, I
Does
promise
make
there is going to be a video about that. I'm getting ready for it. I have to emotionally psych myself to just do it. I have a weird position in history to be able to talk about stuff like that. But
yeah.
dude, this was awesome, and I'm super looking forward to your first product, to learn more about what you're doing. So anything you can share with us, do it in real time. And I think that the discussion around the gas limit is one that needs a lot more attention. especially since there's no one on the Ethereum side talking about it. In the Ethereum Classic, generally speaking, we get one or two people talking about an issue, like Sankoff talking about, SHA-3, and
Yeah.
you've got your gas limit. I even made a little ECIP, which I gotta be honest, I realize now is useless because hey, Atlantis went forward and we have no decentralized way of making communication. So if it happen, if things work, they work. Sometimes I guess if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. It's not
Yeah.
a very good upgrade system on the Ethereum-based chains. It's really bad.
Well, we keep on working on trying to improve things. That's all we can do. And I think it's your duty also to champion this the CCIP you put together, man. So I'm gonna push it forward. I hope you'll continue. I know that you're like, I wrote it and let somebody else get it, but the father of it needs to push it forward.
Yeah, I know. I'm always complaining about it on the Ethereum side, and so those arguments apply to ETC too.
Excellent. Well, brother, thank you for the time, and it's a wrap.
Yeah, great talking to you.